I think there are songs on the album that touch a nerve in me a lot more than others. There are some that feel very, very open, very vulnerable. But in some ways I've also learnt that there's an awful lot of protection that goes hand in hand with that. By being at your most vulnerable, you're also as protected as you can be in some ways. There's no kind of facade that anyone has to break through. You're just there. This is me. I don't know, it's like you meet some people and there's that phrase, what you see is what you get. And then most of my friends are like that because I feel very comfortable around people like that. There's no kind of hidden agendas going on. You just know, like, this person, that's how they are. And I think that's a lot of the songs that touch me the most, are the songs that are like that. And on this album, I think a song like Catherine I find very moving again and again. A song like The Garden even, it just touched me very deeply. Electric Light. I think it's generally the songs with this, they're very, very simple, terribly simple, and there's not a lot going on in them apart from my voice and my emotion. For the recording of this album, it's actually spanned over quite a large amount of time. I think I first demoed the songs in, let me think, 1996, 97. And we first went into the studio. This was myself, Flood and Head. We went into the studio in Yeovil in Somerset in 97 and did the first part of the recording. And then I chose to just leave it for a while. I think I was doing a lot of emotional work at that time, and I just needed a break from everything. I just wanted to stop and start looking at my life as Polly rather than my life as a songwriter performer. So everything was left for a while, and then we went back into the studio in April of this year, 1998, and finished it off, and some songs were totally re-recorded and some songs were left alone and some songs I just re-sang. But it was really basically just bringing them back to where I am now, and I think I'd moved on quite a lot in those couple of years, so I wanted to bring them into the fold of where I am. Again, I only want to go back into the studio with Flood and Head. Head's someone that I've worked with again since the first album, recorded the very first album with him in 1991, I think. So at the end of finishing making the album, we all chose to just put that Is This Desire was made by Flood, Head and Polly, because there seemed to be no kind of drawing lines. I couldn't say that Flood produced that song and did Head produce that one, or did he engineer it, or did Flood engineer that? Oh, but I moved a button there, so I must have engineered it. And it all seems so kind of, no, we made this album together. They helped me make it. They helped the whole process come into being, and I couldn't have done it without them. So it was very much a three-way collaboration, I think. We were the only constants throughout the very, very beginning to the very end of these songs coming into being. Other people came and went. The musicians would come into the studio for a few days and go, but we were the only three that were there the whole time. I've always liked to work with different people, for what I was saying earlier on about it's very inspiring to me to see what somebody else can bring to a song, or the way that somebody else approaches music. And when I'd written the demos for these new songs for Is This Desire, I didn't just want to work with the same people that I worked with before, not only for recording but for touring, because I felt the songs were very new. It was a very new approach for me, and so I wanted to work with different people as well. Having said that, there are some people that I couldn't do without in terms of what they bring to my music and their understanding of me. And I think that's the most important thing, is that they know me and love me, I hope, first and foremost, as for who I am. They're people that I've known for years. So I'm talking about John Parrish, Rob Ellis, Mick Harvey from the Bad Seeds, Eric Drew Feldman, who's played with Captain Beefheart, Frank Black. These are all people that are my best friends, firstly. Flood, Head, it's all people I feel so comfortable with, but they just have a certain sensitivity, sense of compassion and understanding that I feel I can completely trust them with my songs, which are like, my children or something, but I feel safe that they'll look after them too. So on this record, there are songs that I felt suited different people more than others. A song like The Garden, for instance, I just gave to Rob Ellis. I said, Rob, what would you do with this if somebody just said, help? And I gave, the song was written, the structure, the words, the melody, the chords, but I was wide open apart from that. It's a ready-made song. How would you play that? With Mick Harvey, I thought a song like Angeline would be really good for him, and he brought his interpretation to that song, and I just found that so inspiring. And a lot of people that I've continued then to use from my band for touring as well. I have John, Eric Drew Feldman, Rob Ellis, and I'm also working with Jeremy Hogg as a slide guitar player, lap steel player, who I'd worked with on the collaboration Dance Hall at Louse Point with John Parrish, and we toured that album with a set of dancers about 2 years ago, I think, or a year ago, and Jeremy was in the live band for that. I've also worked with Jeremy off and on for years now, so he's someone that I knew very well, and he also played on Is This Desire. A lot of people have commented that my singing is quite different on this album, and it is for a number of reasons, I think. A lot of the album was started as 4-track demos, as all of when I'm writing I always demo firstly on my 4-track at home, on my own, where I feel very comfortable, very uninhibited, and it's just me with me. It's very, very pure. It's just myself. I'd always found the recording process a bit difficult in the fact that then you have to kind of remake that all over again in a studio. And this time around, I just thought, why? Why do we have to do that? And so instead I talked a lot with Flood and Head, who I made the new album with beforehand, and we discussed just transferring all of my 4-track demos onto a multi-track recorder and working on top of it, which is what we did, and that was how I forgot what the new album's called, and that was how Is This Desire was made. And it all began with my home demos, which is also then, my voice is very relaxed. There were some songs that were re-sang, but again, I'm now at the position where I know Flood and Head so well that I can do a vocal take with them in the room, and it really doesn't faze me at all. And that's different. I mean, on the last album, To Bring You My Love, I used to have to send Flood out of the room, go away, I'm doing a vocal take. But it's very different now. A couple of years down the line, we know each other a lot better. So that's one reason. I think another reason is it's been 2 years. I've been doing a lot of personal growth and finding my inner child and things like that. I have been doing a lot of work on myself personally, and I think I'm probably at the age where everybody starts to look at that, or starts to look inside a bit more. I'm 28, won't be long till I'm 30, and then you start thinking, just what is life all about? And so then you start doing a bit of digging around, and I've done an awful lot of that, and unearthed a lot of unpleasant things and a lot of very pleasant things, and I think all of that comes across in the new songs and in my voice. I think for the first time in my life, I can say that I'm singing with a voice that is my own, which is Polly, which isn't wearing a mask or playing a part, but it's me, and it's entirely different to anything I've ever done. Artwork, visual artwork, is, like I've said, it's incredibly important to me as a songwriter, but also in terms of using images to illustrate the songs in video. I think it's such a fine line in getting it right. I mean, so much of what I want to do with songs is to leave them open for other people's interpretation. That's what I like from music, is that I can bring myself to this piece of music and it moves me inside just in my own life. I don't need to understand the person's life that wrote that song. And it's always been very hard for me in trying to get that visually as well, in whether it's photographs or whether it's a video for a song. It's kind of still leaving it open enough for somebody else to bring their own emotions to it. And so I'm lucky enough that I've found somebody that I like collaborating with, that I think is on completely the same wavelength with me on that, and that's Maria Mocknash. And so I've continued to work with her since right from the beginning, since the very first single on the very first album, which was Dress. Maria had never made a video before that, and I encouraged her to make one. And that's how it all began. And she's the only person that I really feel comfortable with, I have to say. I don't think I would be happy being just a visual artist and remaining like behind the work. I feel very much that I am a performer, not in the sense that in a mask wearing sense or role playing, but it's very physical what I do. I can't just give it on a record or on a CD. It's like I want to show how it is. I've got to do that with my own physical body, and I want to be recognised for doing that. And I'd be completely dishonest if I said it was nothing to do with like a kind of ego thing as well, I suppose, because it is. It's sort of like when you're a child, it's like, look at me, watch me, no, over here. And it is a bit like that. It's like I've got so much to say, so much to give that it hurts sometimes. It's like bursting, and it's just like, look at me now, and it's a bit kind of urgent. And playing live helps that. It gets rid of that a bit. But it's also, you know, when I see other people performers I really admire. I mean, I can think of Nick Cave for one, of Iggy Pop. I mean, people I'm mostly mesmerised by, and they're very much those kind of all-encompassing characters. When they inhabit a stage, it's theirs. You know, I can remember you saying that to me before. It's sort of, it becomes their own, and you're kind of invited to that space for an amount of time. But this is my space, and I'm going to give this, and you can listen, but you can't cross that line. And it's you know, those people leave me absolutely in awe, and I love feeling like that. Same with some film actors, you know, they're just incredible. And it's that sort of, I'm drawn to that kind of fantasy idol sort of thing too, and I would be lying to say I wasn't. It's fascinating. I love playing festivals for the reason that there's such a wonderful overall feeling to that day. I've always found, I've done quite a number of them now, but I always find that the bands are all very supportive of each other. It's like everybody comes together to make the day, the night as special as possible. It's not a competitive thing, really. It's like everybody is there to have a good time, and we're all going to try and make that happen. And that's the nicest thing about festivals, aside from, you know, you get to see a lot of your other favourite bands playing. Then doing my own shows, there's more pressure, obviously. These people have just come to see me, whereas at a festival, they could have come to see another band. The pressure's really off you then. You just do your thing, and, you know, 10 people might like it, 10,000 might like it, you don't know. And it doesn't really matter. And that's a nice feeling. But your own shows, you know that a lot of the people will have heard your past work, and you have something to live up to. It's a lot more pressure. But, I mean, again, I like challenges like that. Before I got into making music and writing music, I was planning to go to art college to study sculpture. I'd done a foundation course, I'd got a place ready on a course, and I can remember I deferred for a year when I first signed my record deal with Island, thinking, okay, well if it all collapses in a year then I'll go back to art college. And then never got there, and found that I was just enjoying music too much. But art is something that I've always continued to do as much as I can, and if that means just carrying a sketchbook around with me when I'm on tour or when I'm at home. I live by the sea and I'm always collecting things from the beach and just making little things just purely for my own enjoyment, which I'll then either throw in the bin later on or give to somebody. I give away a lot of things. I've always been very interested in exhibitions, and that stimulates me and inspires me with songwriting enormously. So it's like feeding myself. I have to go and see exhibitions in order to be a songwriter. They go hand in hand. I have to do artwork in order to inspire songwriting as well. And I've been asked to take part in exhibitions which I have joined in on. One was for the Lamont Gallery in London. That was about a year and a half ago. So I didn't make anything especially for that. It was just using things that I'd already made from collecting stuff off the beach, and I can remember that it was a mermaid made up of flotsam and jetsam that I had found, and another was stones that I just painted. I painted fish on stones and just fun things, nothing too precious. That's what I love about artwork, I think, because with my music I can tend to get too precious about and very serious about it. I'm a serious songwriter, but with artwork it's something I do for my own relaxation, so it becomes very fun, throwaway, just pretty colours, childlike, how I used to paint fishes on stones when I was a baby child, and just sort of kind of really simple. And that's what I love about it. It kind of brings me back to that base. I've also I did some work especially just recently for an exhibition in my local hometown, and that was more moving into linking. I thought, well, I can't suddenly become an artist again overnight because I hadn't done any art for since the beginning of the year. I haven't done anything. So I thought, well, instead I'll illustrate songs because I have been songwriting a lot. So I was really just marrying images with songs, with lyrics. And I'd also been inspired by Maria Moknash's artwork for my new album. Oh, yes. And the way that she was linking images with songs. And I know that a lot of the artwork for my new album came about because I'd given Maria a whole load of images that went with the songs when I'd written them anyway, because that's often the case. There'd be a photograph that's inspired me, or a Polaroid that I've taken, just something that goes with the song in some way. It's a piece of memory, a moment captured. And seeing the way that she'd married these images and my text inspired me for the exhibition. So I nicked all of her ideas and proclaimed them as my own. I always feel like I learn an enormous amount from working with other people. It broadens my horizons no end, I think, to see how another person works, see how another person's mind works. And also, as I get older, I feel more and more open to possibilities of ways of working. I think when I was younger, I was very, I thought that I was working in the right way. This is the way to do it. They don't know what they're on about. And then now I just see that there's so many ways, infinite number of ways you can do something. Not just music, but anything. There's no right or wrong way. Nothing is impossible, all of that. So that's what I get most out of working with other people. It's just an enormous amount of learning musically, in terms of ways of creating music, and also just as a person. Hal Hartley, I was first introduced to his films by John Parrish, actually. I'd never seen any of his work before. And then when I first saw Hal's work, I was absolutely stunned by it. Like, here was somebody saying in film what I've always been trying to capture in music, what I think everyone tries to capture, which is just like a completely fragile and funny quality to life. like all sad and all funny and all broken all at the same time, but really beautiful. And I'm trying to remember how I first met Hal. What happened? How did I first get to meet him? For Hal's film Amateur, he wanted to use a piece of my music. He wanted to use water in one of the scenes, and so he wrote to me personally to ask about that, because he also really liked my music. And then we started just writing to each other. Whenever I was playing in New York, we'd meet up and he'd come to the shows. And I always used to joke with him if you ever got a part for me, a bit part in your film, Hal. And then one day he rang up and said, well, actually I've got a part for you. And then I was totally petrified for a few months, and he sent me the script to his new film called The Book of Life, which he was asked to write an hour-long film around the idea of the millennium, along with 10 other film directors as part of celebrating the millennium, by a French film company called L'Arte. And he had this part for me to play Mary Magdalene, because he's written it all around the second coming of Jesus coming back to New York. It's the eve of the year 2000, December the 31st, 1999. And I come down back to the planet with Jesus as his kind of bodyguard, come secretary, come girlfriend, come, sort of strange sort of mixture. It was an absolutely fascinating process to move into trying acting. And I was very surprised at how rewarding I found it, and satisfying. I'd always thought that music was the only way that could satisfy that part of me, or that part that really wants to achieve something. I don't know what it is. But I found that acting also was filling that place in some way, which has led me to really want to look into acting more. But it's always something that, if I'm going to do that, I'd want to do it well, and I'd want to maybe study acting, take some lessons. It's not something I'd want to move into just because I'm a mildly famous pop star now, she can go and do acting, because I think that can be a trap that people fall into. There are some musicians that have bridged that gap that I really admire, and Courtney Love is one. I think she's a fantastic actress, particularly in the film Basquiat that came out recently, that we made a video for. So it's definitely something I'd like to pursue more. And Hal, I think I was also very lucky to work with Hal in my first acting role, because he was a director that knows exactly what he wants, even down to, you take 2 steps over here, you look at a 90-degree angle, say your line, and then look over there. Count to 2 beats, then you look over there and move 3 paces forward. So it's more like learning dance steps than kind of, there wasn't a lot left to me. But I did find that as the filming went on, he was leaving more and more to me. I think also as he was seeing that I was bringing something of myself to the character. And I think he gave me the part of the character with me in mind as well. He started to write it around me, and every day I'd have learnt my lines, but he'd have changed them to suit the character more as she was developing. It was wonderful, and Hal's also said that he'd like to work with me again in the future. I think he has an opera in mind next. Tricky and I had wanted to work together for a long time, but had never had the time or opportunity free together at the same time. He lives in New York, I live here. It was really difficult. But then he finally came up with the song Broken Homes that he wanted to do for his new album, Angels with Dirty Faces, I think it's called, and asked me to sing that part, which I did earlier on this year. And it's only just come out, so I've been promoting that with him at the moment. But he's somebody that I'd admired for a long time. I think he has what I admire most in other artists, which is that he doesn't seem scared to try out anything he wants to try, no matter how revolting it sounds, how uncommercial it sounds. It's like he's following his own path. And for me, as an artist, that's the most important thing to do, and the only thing that keeps your feet on the ground, keeps you focused. And he genuinely is like that. He does not care what other people think. He just experiments with what he needs to experiment with at that time. it was strange, the whole making of that song, because he recorded his part in New York, I did mine in Bristol, and the video, it was shot in New York and also in London, behind the behind the Astoria, behind the Astoria with rats and rubbish and everything. And then, and then when we came to do a rehearsal to do it for a TV show, I turned up and Tricky didn't, classic Tricky fashion, you know, he hadn't got up. So I was quite surprised when he finally did arrive. But it was quite nice working like that as well. And we're talking about working together in the future, possibly on some more songs on an album together, which we've both started writing for already. And working in a similar way, because it works very well. He also works very different hours to me. Like, he starts work at 5 in the afternoon and works through to 6 the next morning, you know, and I could like do the morning shift and he'd do the afternoon shift, so it could work. I've also collaborated with Nick Cave, and that was probably about 2 years ago now. We knew each other and we were friends, and I have been very inspired by his music since I was really young, since before I even started writing songs. So it was kind of inevitable, I think, that we'd work together. Also because our music does follow very similar paths. I think we're both interested in investigating similar things, similar troubles, joys, whatever. And I mean, that's also reflected in how we are as people. We're very similar people, and he's now one of my closest friends. Someone that understands me, I think, you know, and I hope I'm the same for him. So working together was just a very natural thing to do. And when he asked me, that was the first time we worked together, was for his album, The Murder Ballads, when he was wanting to collaborate with a lot of other people anyway. Another one was Kylie Minogue. He was also working with Warren Ellis from the Dirty Three, and asked me to duet on this song called Henry Lee, which is a traditional folk song, like a lot of the songs were on that album, but he'd kind of elaborated on it, and there was a male part and a female part. So I recorded that with him and made a video. Pascal Comelade was somebody that I've been really interested in what he's doing for years and years. I was first introduced to his music when we were on tour with a band called Gallon Drunk in 1993, I think, and they used to play his music all the time, and as an introduction, like before they'd come on stage. It's just very strange, always reminds me of fairground music, but it was really, really sad, something very haunting about it, but very funny, very fragile and beautiful all at the same time. And then I was playing it a lot, and I got into playing it before we went on stage every night during our tour in 1995. And I wrote him a letter when we were playing in France and invited him to the show and just said that I play his music all the time. And he came to the show, and he's a remarkable character. He doesn't like to be in crowds. I think that's agoraphobic, is it? Or something like that. He can't be in a room with too many people, so I had to meet him in this very quiet coffee shop, and even then you could see he was physically really uncomfortable and kind of sweating and shaking. And so he was somebody else that I knew I wanted to collaborate with. He wanted to work with me because he really liked my stuff. And so he sent me some music, which I then sang on over here, because I think, again, he's not somebody that can even work in a studio with somebody else. He's that uncomfortable about other people, which is fine with me. And he sent me 3 pieces of music. I wrote lyrics to them, sent them back to him, and then went into a studio here, just around the corner in Sherborne, with Head, and recorded them. And they turned out really beautifully, I think. He's used 2 of them in his new album, and one of them was used in the soundtrack to a film I did called The Book of Life with Hal Hartley. It was used for the title track at the end of the film. Nick Bicat I first worked with on a film called Stella Does Tricks. And how did I first... I first got to know him because of a mutual friend of ours from Dorset, whose band I used to play in. He introduced me to Nick Bicat, In fact, it's quite interesting this, so I will tell you. This mutual friend was a guy called Andy Dixon who does the film music for Mike Leigh's films. And I used to play in Andy's band called Bologna when I was really young. I was about 18. Anyway, Andy thought I should meet his friend Nick Bicat because Nick was writing a lot of soundtrack music and was interested in working with me as a singer. So the first thing I did with him was for a film by Philip Ridley called The Passion of Darkly Noon, and Nick asked me to sing the title track on, which I did. The words were already written, I just had to sing the part. And then Nick was asked to write the music for an entire film called Stella Does Tricks by a woman called Koki Zydeco, I think her name is, or something strange like that. No, Koki de Groich, that's it, Koki de Groich. Zydeco, that's an instrument. And so I worked with him on the entire soundtrack. I wrote words for the end title song. I wrote words for a song within the film, and there was a lot of times where I was just making noises during the film to kind of go along with his music. And then just recently, there was a BBC TV series called Holding On, which was shown. It's being re-shown this year, I think, and it won some awards and things. It was really good. It was just about life in London. And I wrote the words for a title song for that, which will be coming out later on this year.